Okay. So let me begin, shall I, Jasper? Okay. So first of all, good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome to this webinar. I'm Chris Nelson from the British Chamber, and we're bringing you today, obviously, another webinar with Secretary Ramon Lopez of the Department of Trade and Investment. Today's webinar, as with many webinars, is brought here actually by the joint efforts of a number of European chambers. And I'd just like to thank my partners because we've worked well together and continue to do so. Alphabetical order, this is in the order I wrote it when I woke up. It's Austria is joining us for the first time. We have Germany, French, European, Spanish, Nordics, and Dutch. I think I haven't left anybody out, Jasper. And I'd like to say thank you again to the Nordic Chamber who are kindly hosting this platform. I'd also obviously like to give a warm thanks to Secretary Ramon Lopez, who again has been very generous with his time and agreeing to do this webinar with us. Obviously, this comes at a particularly pertinent time, the first day of the modified or reverting back to the modified enhanced community quarantine. Just to put it into context, Secretary Lopez was kind enough to do a webinar with us on the 14th of May. So that's about 3 months ago. A lot happens in 3 months. The first time, I think from the 16th to the 31st of May. And then we've had, of course, the general community quarantine, I believe, if I'm correct, from the 1st of June to now August 3rd. I think what we're going to be discussing today is rebuild and how we can obviously work together and get the Philippines, obviously, economy moving again and regrowing and actually providing, as Secretary Lopez said in a statement, which I believe was issued yesterday, about obviously providing livelihood and jobs. Clearly, we understand the call that was made by the medical professionals. I'm sure also equally, everybody will understand that it was a concern for various people in the business, particularly for our members who've just started again and now obviously have to close operations. I think I would just like to stress at this particular point, many of our members are very concerned. They're also concerned for their employees because they provide jobs and they obviously wish to be able to plan, which I'm sure everybody appreciates is particularly difficult at the moment. That's not anybody's fault, but that's obviously a key factor. But what we really like to hear today is what are the plans, what are the opportunities? And then again, Secretary Lopez has kindly agreed. We have obviously, as you would appreciate it, a lot of questions. And I would just also like to thank him for his statement he made on Saturday, which I think obviously we understood in terms of trying to balance the very difficult issues between health and the economy. And of course, we also appreciate the work of him and his department, and we work closely. And finally, I'd just like to say that all the chambers and business communities, our key issue and role is how we can make sure the economy comes back and how we can support and obviously work for our members. Secretary Lopez, can I say once again, thank you for being so flexible and being so kind, and from your excellent office at home, which I can see a flag in the background. So can I kindly hand over to you? I think there's a presentation, and then we will have a series of questions. Thank you again, and good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, again. And thank you to all your colleagues, Mr. Jasper Svenningsson of the Nordic Chamber, Dr. Martin Henkelmann of the German Chamber, of course, our part of the DTI family, our Director General, Roel Barba from the IPO, Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, to the other distinguished members of the various EU chambers, as well as the Nordic Chamber and the German Chamber, officers and members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, my apologies for having this schedule move from yesterday because of another scheduled IATF, the Interagency Task Force, that's really behind all these uh, policies governing the country as it battles the coronavirus, COVID-19. Um, I have prepared a series of slides. I usually would include a bit of chronological events just to put everyone on the same page, but I will go quickly on the first part and focus really on the second part, which is the way forward. And we have completed the program and we called it Rebuild. Can you go to the title page first? Rebuild as in revitalizing businesses, investments, livelihood, and taking note of the importance of domestic demand as a way to restart the economy. So this is our way also of balancing health and economy. So we go on to the outline of the presentation. So phase one, I'll briefly discuss health, our strategy of at the first part of the quarantine last March, uh, putting health as taking primacy over the economy. But there is what we call the phase two, which is now moving towards balancing health and economy. And the way forward is, which is the rebuild that I described earlier. So the first part, we'll breeze through the first part. I understand some of you might have seen this. It's a summary of where the Philippines was coming from, just to show you that we were there and we believe that we can bounce back to that kind of position because given the basic economic fundamentals that we have. If not for this COVID-19, our numbers were really pointing towards an upward momentum. And I will show you, of course, the changes, especially the recent numbers. But we still look up to a better future, definitely, given all the macroeconomic fundamentals that the country still possess. So just a few charts on the Philippines as having strong economic fundamentals. It's a country that has grew 5.3 times since 2000 and 1.4 times since 2015 from 1985, 0.7 trillion pesos. Now in 2019 to 19.5 trillion. The GDP per capita has improved tremendously, almost 6 times more from 1985, from 566 to $3,464 per capita income. Next, please. And you can see on the chart basically the strong growth momentum, keeping it at the level of over 6%, hovering from about 6.4 to 6.7 on the average. You can disregard the quarter one, quarter two of 2019 because those were the period when the budget was not passed on time. It affected a lot of our capex, capital expenditure, especially on infrastructure development and construction. But essentially, with all the continuous reforms that we did and that we continue, like on trade and investment, on tax, even on the very sensitive political product like rice, the liberalization of the rice sector, making it a rice tariffication system, as well as the build, continues to provide that very robust growth momentum for the country. Next. So GDP, good average, 6.6. Next, please. And of course, the unemployment figure, no, back. Unemployment figure of about 4.5, 5.1. In fact, I remember even in the 2015 or earlier, we even had unemployment to the tune of about 8 or 9%. So now we were able to bring it down towards December. I think the last number was about 5.3%, and underemployment reaching about 13% from a high of about close to 20% at the start of 2016 before the Duterte administration. So pretty good trend there. Despite the increasing number of workforce, we are able to create more jobs for the economy, and therefore still lowering the unemployment rate despite increasing population and increasing number of workers. Next, please. And inflation rate, except for 2018, of when the world oil prices started to go up, it affected our inflation rate because we're import dependent, especially on oil. Then brought it back to 2.5, and until now, up to this year, despite the crisis, we're still maintaining this kind of inflation rate, very stable. Okay, next. And this is the Board of Investment, approved investment. This is 2019 figure, 1.14 trillion. The first time we reached a trillion peso level. This is third year straight of reaching record level. From 2017, 617 billion to 2018, 915 billion pesos. And 2019, the 1.14 trillion, or about 22.8 billion pesos. Dollars, I'm sorry. Next, please. And even on exports, despite what's happening globally because of the earlier issues on China-US trade war in 2019, we were hovering at positive growth. We understand that many other ASEAN countries were already experiencing decline, but Philippines, like Vietnam, I think we're just the two countries posting positive exports growth until February before our lockdown. Next, please. And so here comes the lockdown in March 16, where we were, and of course the emergency phase, as well as the what we call the strictest lockdown, which is the enhanced community quarantine, as declared by the president, March 16 of this year. Next. So, and this is where I call it health taking primacy over economy, the fact that we locked down and giving more importance to lives because nobody knew then how are we going to battle the virus, and we don't even see the enemy, the virus. So it was really just taking precaution, and everybody asked to stay at home. But keeping, next chart, keeping some of the essential businesses open. But before that, we immediately instituted the price freeze on many commodities. By the way, this price freeze as of I think 3 months after, this has been lifted already. But there are still issues on those orders and profiteers. So we were able to arrest, by now, the number is actually over 500 people already, as we tied up with other enforcement agencies like the NBI, which is the equivalent of FBI, and the Philippine National Police and the DTI. Next, please. And there's, of course, closure of non-essential businesses. And next, there's just a few, about 10 or 11 essential businesses that remained open. So even at the height of ECQ, we made sure that the basic essentials, the food, those hygiene products, medicinal, retail, logistics, banks, powers, hospitals, of course, delivery services continued to operate. And more importantly, we made sure the export companies in the PEZA or even outside PEZA, as well as the BPOs, the business process outsourcing sector, would remain open to fulfill their commitments from foreign clients, local and foreign clients. Next, please. And one thing that we made sure, and which we are again practicing this well today at the start of the modified ECQ, is that we ensured that cargoes would move freely. The personnel of permitted business establishments would continue to move freely as well and be allowed across checkpoints. And next, and as a result of this, we were able to avert any possible shortage in food and essential products. What we're watching really is the aside from the capacity, monitoring the capacity utilization per sector and the major companies in the sectors, basic food products like in the Philippines, instant noodles is one of the considered basic products. Instant coffee, milk, canned tuna and sardines, the canned meats. So we made sure that their operations would be close to 100%, despite the ECQ. So we allow movement. Raw material covers anywhere between 13 days to 2 months. And the finished goods supply cover from 2 days to about 18 days. Actually, just an update. Just yesterday, we had a meeting, an update on this. Actually, since we have been on general community quarantine, a lighter lockdown, we have reached actually about, for finished goods, from this number, we are now about actually 2 weeks to almost 2 months in certain cases of inventory days cover. Okay, and for raw materials, 2 months to 6 months cover. So we have a lot. I mean, in other words, so we were just uh, telling the people, those who were, as usual, doing panic buying yesterday because of the change in community quarantine. So we were just telling them that they don't have really to worry. We have a lot of food. And even on the agriculture side, there are, of course, the statistics would show abundance in supply, except for pork because of the ASF issue. But the chicken, the eggs, the rice, and all that, we're okay. So no food shortage. And that is also because of that policy on cargo movement. We made sure that continues. Next, please. Next. Yeah, just to show you that there's a whole of government approach with even with the Congress. We worked out a special law, Bayanihan, which is like a community cooperation, working as one, to heal as one act. So there was a Bayanihan 1, which expired a few weeks ago. And now the Senate and Congress, actually they're meeting to work on the Bayanihan 2, which basically would govern some of the special emergency measures during this period, like the ability to quickly buy many of the medical devices, give some more incentives for the manufacture of COVID-19 related products, and many more incentives. We have included also the medical devices in the IPP of the Board of Investment. IPP is the Investment Priorities Plan. Sectors there would be made eligible for fiscal incentives. And of course, the continuous facilitation services on many of the issues, even on cargo, on the travel ban exemption. By the way, while we have a travel ban exemption and no visa issuance, but for companies and their officers or technical experts who would need to come to the Philippines, we are issuing special visa for them. So for your companies that would need experts to come over, we would be facilitating the issuance of visa. Okay, next please. And these are the other memorandum circulars on rent reprieve, or at least deferment, on workplace health protocol that we issued, DTI and Department of Labor. We issued also anti-hoarding and anti-panic buying, which we lifted already because things started to normalize towards the GCQ. And I don't see the need to reissue one, even we are at modified ECQ now, because we see that this will only be just for 15 days. And then the DTI DOF, Joint Memo Circular on the importation and also on incentives of products related to preventing COVID-19. Next chart, please. So, however, this lockdown, especially during the ECQ and MECQ in March, April, May, led us, of course, to a drop in the GDP. So from what used to be 6.7 range, we're now seeing minus 0.2 in the first quarter, a full year estimate of about 3.4. This number can grow big. It depends on really on what will happen in the next few months or few weeks. So it can probably even be worse than this 3.4 decline. We're waiting anytime now, I think in the next few days, the second quarter contraction in the GDP. Next. And this is how we rate compared to the other countries. Probably by this time, some of these numbers would have changed even for other countries. So, but this is what we have so far coming from ADB for ASEAN and also the World Bank numbers. Next. And so you will see on the first quarter, the items really affected are household expenditure, which used to be at the high 5.7, high 5 and to 6%. It's now 0.2. Unfortunately, household expenditure, consumption expenditure accounts for about 70% of the economy. It's a consumption-driven economy. On the production side, it's service-driven. Services which have been growing at about 7 to 8%, dropped to 1.4, and industry about 5 to 6%, dropped to minus 3%. Okay, next please. Unemployment, of course, from the 5.3 we showed earlier, has gone up to 17%, and so with the underemployment rate, close to 19%. We hope to see, however, since we started to reopen May, June, about latter part of May, June, we are hoping that maybe the June numbers would show a slightly better number than 17.7 when you talk of unemployment. So that we have a more positive view on the change here in unemployment and underemployment. Next, please. And impact on exports has been tremendous, significant, from a positive number to minus 24 to minus 50. Actually, even imports grew even, declined even worse than this. I think it's minus 60% in that vicinity. So the net effect actually is a better trade surplus during this time. Next, please. So as we move forward and started to reopen the economy, next chart. So from the ECQ and the modified ECQ towards June, we had a GCQ. And in some areas of the economy, we were already having modified GCQ, which is a lighter community quarantine. Here's a progression of basically the percentage, the dates, of course, and the percentage of sectors that are open. During the ECQ, it was about 50% that were continuing to operate. This is 50% of all the sectors that remained open even during ECQ. The modified ECQ opened other manufacturing industries, other services that are shown there, and that would be about 75% of the economy based on their contribution to GDP on these additional sectors. Towards the GCQ, we opened a lot more, and for other manufacturing, so the 50% operation for other manufacturing was allowed to operate at 100%. So that's a difference. Many of you will ask, what again was the MECQ principle? So we are now back again from 100% in GCQ to 50% in modified ECQ starting today. And many of these items that you see under GCQ are no longer allowed again. These were 15 days. The small private construction, some mall-based operations are from 100% to 50%. The more popular consumer service, barbershop salons, the dining in restaurants, the gyms, what are the other internet centers, computer shops. These are some items that were supposed to be allowed under GCQ now, but again, postponed for now, suspended as we are back to MECQ. Okay, and so under GCQ, we were already operating about 95% of the economy. The remaining sector were actually those to be open under the modified GCQ. But unfortunately, instead of progressing to modified, we at least Metro Manila and some provinces in like Bulacan and Cavite, Laguna, Batangas, I think the bigger provinces south of Manila, they are back to the modified ECQ for 15 days. But all other provinces and HU and highly urbanized cities actually are in the modified DCQ. So a lot more sectors are open. Practically 100% of the sectors are open under the modified DCQs. Next, please. Um, so with the anyway at the when we were reopening, we were already seeing this improvement even in the manufacturing index towards May and June. The low point from 39.7 index to 31. It went up already to 40 in May and close to 50 in June. As you know, 50 is the middle ground, above which there is growth, below which there is contraction. Next, please. Even the output index, manufacturing capacity utilization, because of the reopening at that time, show the slight improvement, 71 to 73%. Output index from 10 to 29 to 51. So again, more than 50 is a positive indicator already for output that essentially increased during the GCQ. So those were signs of recovery already, the start of the recovery as we were reopening the economy. Next, please. And even the Board of Investments, again, these are the pledge investments. They continue to grow, showing a doubling of numbers from 304 to 645 billion in pesos for the first 6 months, and a 57% increase in the projected employment growth for these investments. Next. And these are the sectors where investments are getting into infrastructure and construction, followed by transportation and storage, and then the real estate and mass housing. Manufacturing would be the fifth, the top 5 performing sectors. Next. And also another good indication, the decline in exports softened a bit. The last count, May, was minus 35, coming from a minus 50%. Okay, next, please. Headline inflation continued to hover at 2.5%. Okay, next. So prices relatively stable. So this is where we'll sort of focus a bit. This is the way forward. So the phase 3, again, the Rebuild Philippines. This is the revitalizing businesses, investments, and livelihood for focus on micro SMEs as well. And on the domestic demand side, of course, bringing back the demand. And because there's a simple flow chart to this, of course, next, please. Okay, so the Rebuild Philippines is all about building back better. The vision is to create a better future for Filipinos. What we're saying here is that despite the pandemic, we have to stay the course and really look at what are the essentials for the industrial development side of the country, the industry that will determine how strong trade can also be. So this is the overall vision. And the objective is really to have modernized and integrated industrial capacity, one that would give high value products and services, especially as it relates to the global value chain, which we are a part of, and this time trying to inject and increase the value, high value content of the products and services, and contribute, of course, to the socio-economic development as it contributes to the infra objectives, the health objectives, poverty alleviation, employment, of course, and the sustainable environment objectives. The goals, what we want to see is, of course, a reduction in trade deficit, a higher value creation, better backward and forward linkages, in other words, addressing the gaps in between sectors, and having, of course, modernized Philippine industries. Next, please. So, but the immediate need really for now is to how are we going to revitalize consumption and revitalize demand. So we simply adopt the usual macroeconomic model, what they teach us in grade 1. So this is the consumption, investment, government, and exports, less imports. And on the production side, making sure that we empower and build, increase the production capacities to capture the demand. And of course, as in many countries, the interest is to increase the capacity so that we are able to address the trade deficit. So building on the agri capacity, the industry, and the services capacity. Okay, next. The economic stimulus that is of immediate interest to us is how are we going to create consumer confidence? How are we going to create demand? And essentially, the, 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 the model, the simple framework is, the task is how are we going to support companies to keep the jobs and income of people. In fact, to save jobs and the income that will strengthen the demand, and the demand that will entice companies to produce more and create create higher supply, and the cycle continues that will again sustain the operation of these companies. Next please. So just for some immediate economic stimulus, we are not forgetting that we have to immediately just provide the bridge loans, soft loans, working capital loans. Some actually we have to add here the loan reprieves that are being worked out with banks right now and the Central Bank of the Philippines. So from our end, we have all these funds, not too big, but we're working on more or I guess additional funding as I mentioned, the Bayanihan 2, the second Bayanihan law that will provide more support or stimulus package will hope to be passed by the Senate and Congress this week. So that should add to these funds that are shown here. And then on the non-financial, we are continuing to provide this more of webinars now instead of physical entrepreneurship training and counseling. How businesses should pivot their business models, transforming their business models, e-commerce development, financial advisory, how do they manage their finance, still pursuing innovation, our training, technical education agency working on upskilling and reskilling of workforce, the DOLE being more flexible now as to work arrangements, allowing 4 days per week or lesser work hours per week, just to save the job. And the Department of Labor has issued circulars that provides more flexible work arrangements. And of course, hiring of more workers where we can, like the priority now, it's micro lending. We're adding also here for contact tracing, workers for contact tracing, and other roles that are needed at this time of the pandemic. Next, please. Our microfinancing loan program, as mentioned, we have here loan approval of almost half of the budget of 1 billion. We have a pending request of 5 billion pesos at the stimulus package program being worked out. But immediately right now, we also have an approval in principle of 1 billion peso from other government financial institutions in the country. That will add to this 1 billion pesos. Okay, next. And so on the demand side, we want to make sure that the demand side would continue to be worked on consumer expenditure, on investments, government expenditure, exports, and imports, as managing imports. Next, please. So on the consumer expenditure, I mentioned the need for economic stimulus to save jobs and income, bring back consumer demand, and restart as a way to restart the economy. We always promote, of course, buying local. We have a campaign, Go Local, for the products of the SMEs as a, to really help stimulate demand, especially for the SME products, which are really the companies hard hit by the pandemic. So this is the one town, one product, and then the Go Local store concept, which is basically a market incubation concept for SMEs, and their products are given exposure at the major malls in the Philippines for free. Increase accessibility to markets and online platforms. We're doing a lot of seminars on this one, digitalizing the operations of even the micro SMEs. Teaching them, of course, fintech, contactless payments, as well as linking logistics for the delivery fulfillment. Strengthening consumer protection as a way to increase consumer confidence. So this particular sector or program of the DTI is being enhanced, more so at this time of the pandemic, hopefully to create to help increase consumer confidence, among other factors that are needed to increase consumer confidence. No? And then to ensure safety of consumers, COVID-proofing businesses to reduce the fear. So doing all these DTI, Department of Labor, health protocol standards, the sanitation in store, or having food baths, dividers, acrylic dividers, of course requiring wearing of masks, etc. Next, please. On investment, of course, the improving the investment climate. So we have here the major reforms that are being finalized, hopefully, again, by this Congress. We hope to pass the CREATE. This is the new name for an acronym for this tax reform that will, again, improve the investment incentive scenario in the Philippines. Immediately, the corporate income tax rate will be brought down from 30% to 25% when this law is passed. And this law has been adjusted also when it comes to putting a time bound on incentives for existing companies enjoying it, but lengthening the transition period from 2 years to 5 years now. The maximum is about 9 years. We're even trying to consider for companies that they do not reduce workers to be given maybe an additional year of tax holiday or tax incentive as a way to incentivize them not to remove workers. So these are just being considered now. Other reforms like the Retail Trade Act, the Public Service Act, Foreign Investment Negative List are still in the top priority list of reforms that we have to do. Infrastructure build-up, of course, the build. Promote IP, intellectual property generation and commercialization. So Director General Barba will be happy with this. I didn't include this here because Barba is here, DG Barba. It's really part of our priority. And also to implement policies that will promote rural development and provide incentives for investments outside metropolitan areas. So that means what in the CREATE, we put there more years of income tax holidays and other forms of incentives from the local government. Next, please. And of course, the build is one major uh, project or program of government that not only builds the much needed infrastructure for business, but of course, it's a job generating program. Easily over 1 million of jobs created under the Build program. We are starting to do this we're starting to develop a program also for strategic stockpiling. I mean, government procurement for, I guess, critical medical products, which we saw was a real need at the start of the pandemic. You know, the mask and both N88, N95 masks, the coveralls, PPEs, even the temperature scanners. So these are strategic products that will have to be stockpiled as a program. Next. On the exports, we would continue to maximize the utilization of our FTAs and GSPs. Of course, we are very grateful as we welcome, of course, the continuing GSP with EU and, of course, the US. And hopefully we can graduate also to FTAs with these two continents. And we are working on an FTA with Korea, reviewing the FTA with Japan. We just had an FTA with the some European countries, the 4 EU FTA countries. Then also strengthen the promotion and deepening of the global value chains as we would like to make sure that our participation in the global value chain is one that will yield higher value, creating more value, and of course greater income possibilities for the exporters, both on the manufacturing side as well as service sectors. Next. Enforcing standard as a way to be careful with the imports that we do, the products that we bring in. There are now about 79 products subject to quality standards review, both for locally produced as well as imported products. Okay, this is our way to protect also the consumers. No? Make sure that no substandard products are sold in the market. So this is one area that we have strengthened as well, as we do also tie-ups with a lot of testing facilities, and right now we are also building our own or improving our own testing capacity. We already have a testing facility, but we are enhancing it by buying more testing equipment. Next. So the production side, of course, we are here focusing on mainly on industries that we would like to promote. So basically to empower production capacities to capture demand and hopefully improve also our trade balance. So one is continue to accelerate investments in sectors that are important. So we basically put here about 5 descriptor of major sectors, those industries under basic necessities. So like the food, of course, health is a very relevant sector nowadays. Of course, education sector, industries that are supporting fourth industrial revolution, so smart manufacturing, digital technologies, addressing supply chain gaps, stronger industrial baselines, essentially addressing gaps in the value chain, which are not, for example, not existing products that are not manufactured in the country. The extent possible, we would like them to be manufactured. One clear example is steel products. So the basic steel, the billets, the slabs are all imported. And we just do the downstream products. So what we want to have is an integrated iron and steel industry here. And there are now about 3 projects Their timing was just affected by the COVID, the pandemic, but we see them getting to be implemented hopefully by the second half of this year, if not next year. Then, of course, we want to improve infrastructure and transport for a more modern Philippines. And of course, generate sectors that generate high value and job creation. Mostly this would be also in the creative sector. Okay, we want to intensify also implementation and wider coverage of supplier development programs. So what we want here is big companies trying to look for a local, producer, supplier, so that they can increase their local content. Um, Agri-industry linkage, of course, processing food as a good agri-industry development, MSME linkage with the big business, essentially asking business sector, what is your inclusive business model? I mean, how can you connect with local producers and suppliers as a way to make your business model more inclusive? We want also to develop the PPE ecosystem, including establishment of testing laboratories. So the next two charts will just show you, next chart, the some repurposing of manufacturing that we did. So these are the companies that got involved in production of face masks. When at the start of the pandemic, we only had Medtex, the upper left, one Taiwanese company operating in Japan, doing about 15 million pieces per month. It was even about, at that time, I remember right, I think about 8 or 6 million pieces per month. So they also expanded in the last 3 months. Then Yoko Isada, other companies, EMS and Semicon company started to produce also masks, NKG and EWIC Philippines. The non-woven polypropylene is an Australian-owned company. The face mask, non-medical grade, some exporters, garment producers in Cebu have started to do also the reusable, washable face masks. And also the Confederation of Wearables started to do coveralls. Next, please. Some have started to produce ventilators. New Kinpo group from Taiwan, EMS again, and also the Semicon IMI company. Okay, doing ventilators. Next. Okay, continue the empowering of production capacities. We want to go into digital transformation, develop innovative startups also as a sector that with the new laws that were passed to promote startup business models, support businesses to provide new necessities in the new normal, the new delivery models, food modernization, retooling and rescaling the labor force as it complements the requirements of the above industries I was talking about. Further improving market access. So I talked about some FTAs being negotiated. I forgot to mention the RCEP that hopefully will be finalized and signed by the end of the year by the summit, the leaders of the ASEAN and RCEP countries, minus India. So that's ASEAN plus 5 countries now. Okay, promoting Philippine high-value exports and, of course, addressing the core problem also of the local manufacturers. These are the smuggling and unfair trade practices. Okay, next chart. Okay, redirecting highly affected businesses and workers towards sectors that are getting to be needed right now. More on private school. These are the affected private school teachers, tourism, the events, transport workers. Hopefully, they get to be more involved now in healthcare, in agriculture. Hopefully, to be absorbed also by manufacturing, IT, BPM, which continue to present opportunities for employment, and of course, the growth of the public school sector. Then the sustainable projects and operations of companies, greening of industries and waste management, And finally, the integration of anti-COVID measures in populations of commercial establishments, offices, and industrial facilities. Okay, next. So if we are to put the different strategies, different sectors into agri, industry, and services, this is what it will yield. Basically, the more specific sectors. So I just showed them. So A, B, C, and then D and E. Next. Next chart. For a modern Philippines. So, and then to generate high value creation, like in furnitures, textile, on services, on that high value, referring to tourism, the creative content and services, including graphics, game development, the film, software development. These are sectors actually that have been growing despite little support from government before. So we are making it as a special sector now that would hopefully, or that would get more support as we allocate some of our budget actually in these sectors now. And of course, the IT/BPM sector. Okay, so I guess that's the last. And as we do all this, the rebuild, hopefully we as a country can heal as one. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Secretary Lopez, thank you very much for that. I believe it's now close to 4 o'clock. We have you until 4:30. Is that correct? I know you. Is that okay for another 30 minutes?
Yes. Hopefully about 14. I have to run to the next meeting, Zoom meeting.
Run to the next Zoom meeting. I think that's what everyone does now, right? So we've got another approximately 17 minutes. The first thing I'd like to say is thank you. I assume that presentation is available that we can send to the attendees. Is that correct, sir?
Correct. So we'll ask our staff to share the presentation.
Because it's very good, but obviously it's hard to take it all in obviously in one go. The other thing, and I'm sure you've been very generous, we have had a lot of questions which we had in advance, which obviously come in as we're discussing, and it's not always possible, obviously, in the time. So we will send those to you, and obviously look forward to liaising with your staff to get them answered when obviously can, if that's okay.
That's okay. In fact,
I'd like to tell everybody
that will allow me to give a more complete answer to those questions.
Is that okay? Yeah. The other thing I'd just like to say is that this has been recorded, so obviously we can send that to the participants. I just also like to say that we have some people who've dialed in from London, so thank you to that. That's actually Peter Beckham, who was a former ambassador here. Also Paul Diamond, the former ambassador, both members of the Philippine British Business Council. The co-chair here is Ambassador Tambertine. We also have Richard Colley, who's the regional international trade director from the British Embassy. And we also have your staff from the Trade and Investment in London. So this is a global event, and I'm sure there are people from Europe as well. So just to let you know. So,
thank you.
And we have over 250 participants. The first thing I want to ask you, if I may, and I think it's probably the toughest question, the 15 days of which has just started is, if I understand correctly, is to re-strategize the health plans, right? Well, that was one of the statements quoted. Could you give us, I appreciate you're only one aspect of the government, sir, but if you could give us some thoughts in that context, and also going forward, how we can work at balancing the economy and health, right? Because I'm sure everybody appreciates across the divide that closing down is obviously disruptive, and you've shown the chart for the impact. And obviously what we want to do together, we would like to reopen more progressively if we can, right? So if you have any thoughts there, that would be highly appreciated if you could share it.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I must tell you that the IATF still has that mindset to continuously reopen the economy, and this is just really a step back. just to heed to the call of the medical practitioners and cabinet as well as the president. I guess as a consensus of really uh, trying to address the concerns, but at the same time, it can provide some time for uh, the health sector to sort of strengthen some parts of the system. To be specific, really strengthening how we can do more, strengthen the contact tracing aspect, the ability to search for these other affected individuals, get them tested, isolated, and treated. No, so that is one uh, set of activities that will have to be strengthened if we are to have a stronger approach to addressing the pandemic. And as we reopen the economy, uh, again, just to reiterate, the general thought is really reopen and really bring back jobs to the workers. It's a concern of all in the cabinet. That's the reason why for so many weeks, despite rising numbers, I mean, in the past 2 months, we continued to keep it at the GCQ level instead of escalating it to MECQ. It took some time before it was really step. We had a step back, uh, but because also the major consideration is as we are reopening the economy, we always make sure that we are instituting really stricter standard protocol, health standard protocol. We impose a lot of this protocol as we reopen a particular sector. So there's sector-specific protocols, and we get to audit them. I mean, their operation, and we have a daily report on these. So we're confident that on the business side, of course, there is a strict compliance. Our compliance rate is 92 to 100% on per protocol that's monitored. Of course, the reality also is that as people move around, there is a tendency of transmission, and it could be off work, it could be more on at home in the family, and I think the what will have to be strengthened on those aspects is how we can really institute the discipline of always at all times wearing the mask and doing physical distancing everywhere you go, wherever you are, whether in the public transport and any place. That is really the must, and it is therefore a good reminder for all of us that as we go back to MECQ, at least for NCR, we are reminded of this basic protocol and the danger out there, no, with the increasing number of COVID cases. But as we report the increasing number, again, we must be reminded also that numbers are increasing because of the significant increase in the testing capacity. We're doing a lot more tests now. So yes, the positivity rate is growing, is growing to, I guess, marginally, it's going up, but to us, I think the opportunity side there is we are able to spot the virus. I mean, the carrier and ability to isolate, which and then is what we want to happen and control. So
Okay.
basically, so that would continue to be the effort, strengthen that, and open again gradually the economy after. After 15 days, so we can hopefully resume. And we'll try other means. I mean, this is also a time to re-strategize, as mentioned. Maybe other working arrangements. There are proposals now. As you know, working 14 days and work from home 14 days, or 5 days, 10 days. Work 5 days, work 10 days, quarantine. So we will look into all these possibilities.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, also, of course, you mentioned that the Philippine economy is consumer driven. So the which you need to give to consumers who eventually, when you reopen up to go out, is confidence, right?
Yes.
That's a key factor. And that was actually mentioned during one of our other webinars with Congressman Sharon Goring. And also, of course, mass testing may be more focused, which was also mentioned under Project ARC. Can I bring you to a couple of other points and try and link it? So first of all, 90% of all the companies in the Philippines are, I believe, SMEs or MMSMEs, small companies, right? These are critical in terms of providing jobs. So in the stimulus plan, is there anything specific to them? And if I may link it as well, it's a major issue which is constantly being raised, is actually about rents. As you know, a lot of the office spaces of everybody is actually totally underutilized because people are working from home. Now, apart from obviously the president has appealed and there's been rent deferment, could there be anything more specific? Because this is a key overhead cost for many companies, particularly small to medium size. So it's a dual question, sir. Any specific stimulus for SMEs? And could we do something more specific on getting, frankly, rent reductions or relief?
Yeah. On the stimulus, that's I guess, a more straightforward, I can give a more straightforward answer as in the stimulus package, at least where the Senate is right now, if I remember right, about 50 billion is geared towards the SME sector, about 50 billion pesos, or $1 billion. But there are other funds going to other hard hit sectors like tourism and agriculture, and of course some in those sectors are also SMEs. No? So in a way, much of the stimulus package are really for the benefit of SMEs. In the rent relief, however, there's little that we can do because it's really a private transaction. Government, especially even up to the point that our president himself raised the request, I guess that's the best we can do for now. We even issued, aside from the president's directive, but it's really more of a moral suasion. We issued a memo circular, but again, just encouraging lessors to grant some concessions on the rent arrangement. It's really a transaction that will depend on the negotiation between the lessors and the lessees. Some, of course, would have more success than the others, but again, it probably would be a more of supply and demand thing as well, because lessors would eventually realize that if they don't help the renters, the lessees, then they might even have a hard time getting lessees or tenants in the future. So that might be also an issue. Or in the end, just to be able to have somebody to rent their place to lower also the rate. So the chances are it might be a function of supply and demand.
Okay. It's just, as you would appreciate, it's going to be a constant theme because it's a key factor for people, particularly with working from home. Can I move you now to foreign investments? Because, of course, as chambers, we want to see more direct foreign investment. I think I was particularly noted to see that two of the legislations I believe you're hoping for in this Congress is the Retail Trade Act, if I recall correctly,
yes,
and the Public Service Act. Just to let you know that the British Chamber, along with many other chambers, is very much in favor of the retail trade liberalization because we have seen a lot of interest. Could I kind of get an indication, when do you think that those acts may be passed? Because also I think based on our feedback from the UK, and I'm sure that's the other chambers, this would be a great signal, right? Because obviously we communicate extensively to interested investors and companies who wish to do business here. So we'd like just some further elaboration on those two acts, please.
Yes, we continue to give this as a top priority, the retail trade as well as the Public Service Act. So if you ask economic managers, this is at the top of the list. Of course, aside from create, the tax reform. So we'll continue to push for this, hopefully within the year, if we can. At any rate, even during recess, we see the Congress and Senate working double time doing hearings on online. I think there's the online hearings sort of facilitate many of the meetings to happen. So we hope that there would be a faster consideration of these pending bills. These are definitely at the top of the list. There's another one that's coming, as mentioned by the president, the internet transaction bill.
Okay.
Is of course moving towards more digitalization of business models as well as governing internet transactions, even taxation internet transactions.
Okay, I just want to push, because I know you've got to go in Zoom in about 5 or 7 minutes. I just want to push through a few more questions, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other one is on we talk about a national government. Now, a number of our members have had issues with LGUs who sometimes reinterpret and reimpose differences compared to the national government. So, and obviously we have people who work in the export zones and they wish to move goods, and sometimes they've encountered issues both for their workers, both for their goods. So could you kind of further give what the process is? How is it being strengthened so that there's a uniform approach, which I'm sure you've encountered in the past, to give reassurances to companies that, yes, if they can operate, they can actually export and do so forth?
Yeah, these matters that concern business operations are of national matters. In other words, any policy that we adopt at the national level should be adopted by the LGUs. And therefore, if there are inconsistencies in application, these should be brought to our attention so that we have a command center that can address the specific concerns. Sometimes at the ground level, even at checkpoints. I remember those were issues, the movement of workers, the people, and this can be addressed. Right now we're what 4 or 5 months into the quarantine. Somehow checkpoints and people have learned how to to operate more efficiently now, and checkpoints are more rational in the sense that this is already a product of their attention was called already, or things that they should not do, that they should just follow. For example, when it comes to movement of people, movement of cargoes, those issues that are being held off at checkpoints are less of an issue now. With this new change in MECQ, probably there will be again a bit of birth pains again, but I think relatively speaking, this will be of less degree now. But any difference in the implementation, you just let us know, and it's very clear that, for example, when it comes to movement of people, cargoes, they should be, of course, they should follow the national rules. What we are allowing LGUs to do, the curfew, the different LGUs are free to impose their curfew or even liquor ban. Even if we say that we're not issuing a national liquor ban, but somehow different LGUs would do that. On that aspect, we don't actually interfere anymore. But anything that is unfair, we try to interfere. For example, a particular case raised to me yesterday, a cargo, a ship docking in that province. Since there is a curfew, they don't want to unload the products, commodities, and therefore it gets stuck there for at least overnight. So the rule there is it should be allowed to unload. The cargoes unloaded and move right away outside. I mean, so those things can be addressed. I mean, so again.
Okay. Can I make a question then? Because there are still some instances. So you say there's a command center. Maybe we can publicize that again, right? So if people are encountering.
All right.
And that I think would be a good idea. The other one is you did mention liquor bans. And I have to say, of course, as we are part of the European Chambers, as you appreciate, we have a number of alcohol companies.
Yes.
we would like your assistance on twofold. First of all our companies are very much promoting responsible drinking. And of course, let's not forget that liquor companies, as a part of there's a lot of duty and tax, and that's revenue for the government. So one of our things back would be to encourage a more national approach, right, and try to keep it in these difficult times. So again, if you could, I know you had a look at it before when we moved from ECQ to MECQ, that was the 14th of May. But again, we would just make that point on liquor bans that the companies are responsible. We understand the issues, but also they're not, let's not forget, they're also taxpayers, and there's a lot of revenue going for the thing.
True. Actually, you know, just quickly on at the national level, whenever we talk to the mayors, there are interactions now. We are the ones telling them that's to not as much as possible, not to be restrictive on this. In fact, even in the serving in the restaurants, I mean, at one point, some LGUs are imposing liquor ban at the restaurant, and we said that that's a normal thing to order together with the food. So, but they change. I mean, they listen to, and they discuss this also with restaurant owners. So things like those they also adjust. But anyway, okay, we'll make sure that it happens. Also,
you can be very
really,
kind. One final question, and I will let you go if I may.
Sure.
And that, thank you for, you made a mention about facilitating foreign technicians or specific people in who may not qualify under the current visa thing. So the two questions, they're related, if I may say. One is, how can people go about that? Is it via your office, if they've got thoughts they need to do? So then the one overall is, there's been a lot of changes, and there's been a question raised is because obviously the main working visa in the Philippines, if I understand, is 9G. That's the code under the Bureau of Immigration. Will there be an overall move to let 9G holders come back? Because obviously some of our members are actually 9G holders, and they may be currently outside of the country. So it's a dual question. So one, how can they go about and apply for specific exemptions? And moving forward, how do you see maybe a general relaxing so that 9Gs, which is the working visa, can enter the country?
These things get to be discussed. The IETF, of course, the policy on these things, but so the latest policy, at least for workers in companies in business, it's or workers or foreign nationals in general will be taken care of by the respective agencies. So when you talk of those related to businesses, operations, the owners, the experts, they can write DTI, and DTI will endorse it to the DFA, so that the foreign affairs, so that they can issue the needed visa for the experts, and those in the companies. But the second point, the visa, the general visa, permanent, maybe the equivalent of permanent residence because we don't have a permanent resident visa, but maybe that is the 9G. I'm not familiar really, but if these are the types of foreign nationals holding this visa, right now this has been discussed in ITF, and right now there's no general policy to allow everyone because of by sheer number, as well as there are also a lot of overseas Filipinos that are returning. So we just want to manage the way, the return and the need to PCR test and all that. So the current policy for now is, again, just to make the necessary request, and we shall consider them. We shall process this request.
So final thing, and then I just want to sort of say, because I need to know you need to go, I guess I'd like to summarize by saying, if we have further requests, we can kind of course it to you, right? We will send you all the overall questions, right? We'll consolidate it.
Yes, yes.
I'd like to thank you again for your time and flexibility. And I'd also like to thank you because I know that I'm sure there's always a strong divide, but we do appreciate the fact that you also are arguing not to move back to ECQ, and we just like to give our thanks for that, right? Although we're obviously in ECQ. And we know it's a difficult debate, but we do strongly believe in balancing health and the economy on that issue. Finally, I'd like to say that all the chambers are interested in obviously working and promoting, and we'd like to obviously have ideas, and I'm sure we'd like to send them to you and to the ITF. The other thing I'd like to tell everybody on the line today, we have another webinar on Thursday, the 6th of August at 2 p.m. And this is going to be with Vince Dizon as the on Build and his capacity as head of BCDA, but also I believe Vince is now the testing and tracing. I hope I got it correct.
Correct.
So that's going to be organized via the German chamber, so thank you to them, but supported by everybody. Sir, I'd like to
just excuse me.
Sure.
So for the visa request, so that I won't get overloaded, they can course it direct to Undersecretary Seferino Rodolfo of the Board of Investment. So it goes, goes straight to him, because whatever I receive, I pass it to him anyway. So
that's fine. And thank you. And if you can also give us later the command center for those people wanting to move goods, if there's any issues.
All right.
One final question, which I'll just say on the air. It's actually because I know the Undersecretary or the head now of the IPO is Raul Barber, who's on the line.
Yes.
So there was a question of why it takes so long for an IPO registration. I'll let him answer that in due time. But I just wanted to mention because he was there. So I think I have to let you go. I just want to say overall, on behalf of the British Chamber and all the other chambers, my fellow colleagues, we appreciate it. What we're here for is to work together. I think you will understand that business would like to see the economy continue to reopen. We hope this is a temporary 15 days. I'm sure you understand where we come from. And also, I just want to stress one point, and if you can relay that, planning is critical to business. And in the COVID, it's very difficult, but as much as we can to try and help companies, because that's about investment. That's about how they see things going forward, and that's important. And we have a common shared desire to support all the employees, right? And that's obviously critically related. So on behalf of all those industries, unfortunately, have not opened today, they would like to reopen obviously on the 18th, hopefully, or 19th. And obviously we'd like to see it continue to reopen. And Secretary, would you like to leave with any final words? But thank you again for your time.
Yeah, just 2 points. Basically, just to assure you, DTI, the Department of Trade, will continue to work for a continuous reopening, a resumption in reopening the sectors. Of course, in a safe way, in a gradual way, but certainly that will be the way forward. And we all understand that the virus is here to stay, so we just have to manage it, live with it, and essentially find ways on how we can operate at the same time, minimize transmission. Then the second point is, of course, thanks to all the everyone here who are really supporting the Philippine economy, the investors, the business groups, the business chambers. Chris, you've helped a lot the Philippines. I've seen your interviews, and sometimes, yes, we appreciate criticism, but those are constructive ones and ones that really find solutions to problems. So we appreciate all those inputs coming from you and your colleagues from the other chambers. So we definitely work with you all, and any concern or policy recommendation that you would really like us to push, let us know, and we will. It is our job to really bring it to the agenda. Thank you, everyone, again, for this opportunity.
So you have a good day. Good luck with your next Zoom meetings, like all of us. We live in a world of Zoom, and I'd like to thank everybody who's attended today. Thank you very much for your participation. I apologize that we've not been able to ask every single question, but we will forward them, and you can answer them more time. And I'd like to wish everybody a very pleasant and safe day, and good luck going forward with everything. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.